Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you guys are. My name's Laura Steward, and I am here with Maya Lin for the fourth installment of the live virtual track sessions for the 2007 IEEE Women in Engineering International Leadership Conference. Today we did have one other speaker who is unfortunately able to make it, so it's likely that it'll be a little shorter than anticipated. But Maya and I are here to tell you a little bit about our journeys, the technology, and how disruptive we think we might be in our own individual industries. And then what we'd really like to do is have an engaged, open dialogue for at least 15 minutes to answer questions. We might be a little bit farther along in funding or in our company creation than some of you, or certainly we'd be open to talking about the technologies that we are both talking about today. So I'm going to let Maya introduce herself, and then we will just kick it off and get ready today.
Sounds good. Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. I'm Mayasari Lim, and I'm CEO and founder of a small startup called SE3D. And what we do is that we build desktop 3D bioprinters for research and also for the classroom. So maybe some of you have heard of bioprinting. It's very much like a 3D printer, but instead of printing out plastic materials, we actually are able to print living organisms such as cells, from bacteria to enzymes to plant cells and even animal cells. So it's very exciting technology. And I started my journey, I guess, as a faculty in Singapore. I was teaching in the bioengineering department, and my background was more on stem cells and tissue engineering, and that's sort of how I got into bioprinting. But I was also introduced to, 3D printing as a technology as a whole for, prototyping. And that has been very useful for my students to learn a lot of the design and engineering aspects. So I was very passionate about this technology and decided that I wanted to do something more than just impacting the students that I connect with, but also students all over the world and, throughout different schools at different grade levels and whatnot. So that's how I started the company. And we are, I guess, at this stage, we are growing. We primarily got funding from the National Science Foundation. So that allowed us to sort of develop the hardware and engineering. And now we have a group of small team of 4 engineers who are working really hard to, make the product even better and more user-friendly. But personally, I'm very excited about bioprinting technology because I think it holds tremendous opportunities and potentials for changing healthcare. So, the holy grail is that one day we could print organs and be able to have an alternative solution for organ transplantation. So that's the dream someday. But in the meantime, a lot of researchers are working on creating 3D tissue-like structures and organ-like structures that could be used for drug testing. And that's really exciting because it could help to advance drug discoveries in the pharmaceutical companies. So that's my quick intro, and I will let you open for more questions if you have that later on. And I'll pass it now to Laura to give her introduction.
Okay, so nothing as exciting as possibly printing organs, but I'm CEO of a mobile app company called VideoFizz, and our patented technology is collaboration of and curation of digital media, so multi-person input. And how we actually use that in a product is we have a mobile app that's great for greetings, video greetings. So imagine you've got somebody who's having an anniversary in your family or a birthday. You can basically invite everyone to film their video greeting, and our app gathers those videos, automatically stitches it together with an animated greeting card at the beginning, adds music, and delivers it back to you instantly, letting you connect with people in your family or friend group from wherever they might be. It's been an interesting journey. It's not at all my background. 2 years ago, I was managing 2 companies for GE, a genomic sequencing business in Houston, Texas, and an oncology clinical trials business in California. And I decided I had this awesome idea for using new technology to connect people together. And I left my my very cushy and comfortable job and went out on my own. And that was wrought with disaster and terrifying. I'm now 2 years in and a little bit bruised and a little bit battered. Know a lot more about tech than I did then, but we can talk about some of the things you need to do when you're ready to take that big step with your idea and about when it's time. I will tell you that I left too early. I hadn't validated my idea, and that left for some about 6 months of drama. But we'll talk about how we're doing now. We've had almost 50,000 downloads. We've got 2 strategic partnerships in the works, one with a $4 billion market leader in our space and another one with a huge online community of about 10 million people. Those things have all happened in the last 60 days. We've got big occasions coming up, so our life is a little cyclical, and Mother's Day comes up and Easter and graduations and things like that. But it's been a lot of UI development, back-end development, and as is the case in every single business, listening to the customer. So, I have a question for Maya. Maya, what business is being disrupted by bioprinting? So what is that replacing right now?
So one of the big pushes is, for example, bioprinted skin, right? So we know that, a lot of cosmetics are actually being tested in animals in the past, right? And obviously there's a push against animal testing. So bioprinting or bioprinted skin is one such technology that will allow us to replace the need for testing on animals. So I think that's
interesting. Could they use it for grafting? Because one of my former lives was an OR nurse, and we used to, have to use skin grafts.
Yeah, I think in the future, that's where they're heading as well, is to do skin grafts. And especially for like 3rd-degree patients, there's just no way, to generate the skin. So you need something like a skin graft to do that. So yeah, definitely a lot of researchers are working towards that. But there's a few companies who are working on the different bioprinted skin types. So for different, different ethnicity, for example. So like a China company was actually working on, or they said that they announced that they have already developed technology for Asian skin types. So yeah, I think that's one that is really exciting, and it's happening today. So we'll see a lot more such companies who are looking at that.
Okay, and if you want to ask a question, you can participate on Twitter. It also says you can use the Hangout to ask questions of myself or Maya. I know that one of the questions that I get a lot is why I left GE, sort of the pinnacle of a large company to work for. And in fact, they had actually purchased a startup that I had been in, an oncology diagnostic reference laboratory called Clariant. And I'd been there about 7 years when they were purchased by GE. And, going from a scrappy startup to being inserted into one of the largest corporations in the world was a lot for some people. I thoroughly enjoyed it. GE are experts at so many things. And so for me, it really reinvigorated where I was in my career, because I was able to use that next 4 years to learn some of the things that GE does really well, some of their Six Sigma programs and how they do product launches and basically how they have created generalists inside their management field. So I really enjoyed it when GE came on. And when I left, it wasn't because I hated GE, and it wasn't because I hated the teams that I managed. I actually loved my job, but I traveled so much. I live in Kansas City, and that's where I'm saying hello to you from today. And that was great for being in the center of the United States. And I would fly to California on Tuesdays and spend Tuesdays and Wednesdays in my office, and then back on Thursday. And then I did that 3 days a week. And then 3 weeks out of the month. And then the 4th week of the month, I would fly to Houston. And, I've got 3 kids, and the road wears on you. And so really it was, how can I find something meaningful to do where I'm still able to challenge myself in development of a business, right? It's a lot different running a company that somebody else pays the bills for and you get a budget for. And basically, you know, if you go over budget, you just go back and you ask daddy if you could have a little bit more money. That is not what the startup world is like. And when the money runs out, everything stops and it dies, and that's the end. So I left GE because I was ready to be the CEO of a business, and I didn't want to continue to travel, and I wanted to stay located where I was at. How about you, Maya? When you made the leap to being your own founder, what was behind that?
Very good question. And I have a follow-up question for you later, Laura, because, you know, I think we share a lot of the bruises and painful journeys that we had to go through. But I think for me also, you know, I was teaching as a faculty for 5 years, and, you know, pretty comfortable with my position, and, you know, the colleagues and the people that I work with were great and wonderful. But we definitely, my husband and I, because my husband is based in San Francisco, the Bay Area, we made a conscious decision that we wanted to come back to the Bay Area. So for me, you know, making transition to the Bay Area gave me sort of an opportunity to think about my career again, whether I want to stay in academia or wanted to try something different. So I decided to look for something else. I thought, you know, I wanted to see what is out there outside of academia. Because I felt that as an academic, you know, all we do is teaching and publishing papers. And I felt that wasn't enough.
Which can be very fulfilling, very fulfilling.
So it's like, okay, I just published paper, then what next, right? So I thought, well, maybe I should do something that's more impactful. And I really wanted to kind of bring a technology that will really impact other people's lives as well. So kind of looked out for that opportunity, and then I read about the National Science Foundation and the Small Business Innovation Research Grants. So I learned about that, and I thought, okay, why don't we try and get some funding and see if I can get some money to get this project idea started. And that's really how things happen, is that we actually got the funding. I was very surprised that I got the funding. But that was great. It was also at some levels validation, right? That the idea is interesting, and NSF thinks that there is innovation and also potential impact to STEM education. So I think that was what really kind of pushed me to go forward for it. But Laura, I think, both of us, being in the same path, would you share a little bit about what are some of the hardest lessons you have learned, I guess, going into the startup?
Well, I mean, I think we could keep it really professional, or we could have some fun here. And I can tell you about a day I spent bawling in a bathroom. So that's probably more entertaining. So one of the reasons that I quit when I did, I probably would have tried to do two things for a little bit longer, but I was accepted into an entrepreneurial fellowship program here in the Midwest. And they required that if you were in their fellowship program, you were solely focused on their venture. It was a rigorous process to be accepted, and by that point it had become a competition, right? There's 6 rounds of interviews and applications, and I really wanted in, and then I got in and I was like, oh no, now this means I literally have to quit. And so there was that defining moment where my husband and I sat down and we're like, am I really going to do this? And all of that, those beautiful checks that were coming in are going to stop, and now I'm going to be starting at the beginning in this fellowship program. And I will tell you that I thought I was fancier than I was. It was a bunch of young kids. I was the oldest by probably maybe 10 years. And I figured I knew everything about business, and this was just going to be teaching me how to raise money for my new company. And we were sitting in the day one of this fellowship program with one of the mentors who was conducting the session. And as we went around the room and introduced our businesses, we had to talk about how we validated our ideas. What's the validation that you have for your business? And there were 10 of us. And by the time the second person started talking, I was in complete terror because I realized I hadn't validated my business at all. And in fact, the business that I have now, VideoFizz, is not the same business that I left for. And by the time it got to me, I was holding back tears thinking I've quit my job and I have walked away from really a pinnacle rise of where I could have been in my career. And I don't even know if people want what I have yet or not. And I'm going to have to say to this group that I didn't validate my idea, or I'm going to have to lie. And I didn't lie, but I owned up to the fact that I hadn't validated it. And I went to the bathroom and I just started crying. And I just had this, giant, overwhelming sense of I wasn't prepared and I didn't know what I had done. And I called my husband and I'm like, you have to come get me and I have to see if I can get my job back because this is going to be a giant failure. And, I'm not really that emotional of a person in that sort of context. And he laughed at me and told me to go back in. And I spent the whole rest of the day doing this. Just tears would be coming out of the sides of my eyes and I was rubbing them away. And I was forced after that first 3-day session to go and figure out whether or not my business was going to be interesting to people and how to validate the idea. The bad news is my idea that I quit my job for, which was video time capsules. Okay, imagine that you record a time capsule and you leave it for your daughter to see when she's 18 or your son to see when he turns 40 or whatever. It wasn't supposed to be death messages, but I guess that's what people thought of when they saw it. I had raised $250,000 to bring that idea to fruition. I'd worked on it for 7 months. I'd launched it and we'd been launched for about, I'd say 2 months and had not a single customer. So that, it's just one of those things. Great news is in validation, we pivoted to this idea and I found something that people could really connect to. But that's for sure. The biggest struggle that I had was right out of the bat, not having validated the idea.
That's a great story.
I know you are working in both biotech and education, so not even really in one niche. So tell me how that's worked trying to fit into a lane with bioprinting.
Yeah, I think for us, it's a very challenging space, I think, because, bioprinting is still so new to most people. And we're trying to bring this into the education market. We're trying to bring this into the high school level even, because for me, I think that, students at the high school level, they're at the juncture where they're trying to decide, what do I do next, right? Career decisions, career pathways, degree choices, and whatnot. And I thought that is a good place for us to introduce new concepts such as bioprinting and opening up their avenues in terms of what they can do. But yeah, I think the toughest part for us is educating, and we still are constantly educating people, teachers, students, administrators, and everybody we talk to what bioprinting is and how our technology is able to provide students with more opportunities in learning, in doing experiments and designing experiments and just opening.
There's a question on Twitter, Maya, that says they would like to know what interesting things you're doing in the high school. So what are examples of things you're actually using the bioprinter for in high school programs?
Yeah, so we have 2 schools who are, they're one of the first 2 schools who started the program with us. One of the teachers, she's an anatomy and physiology teacher, and she's already doing actually a lot of tissue sectioning, and she gets tissue samples to do sectioning. And when she got our bioprinter, she said, oh, I totally want to print stuff and I can section, right, in 3D and all that. So she actually got some really cool biomaterial called bioactive glass that another company donated to her. And these bioactive glass is able to create very unique structures that will allow the cells to grow. So she's actually playing with these bioactive glass to see how that serves as a good material for the cells to grow and how that might change the morphology of the cell. So that was really cool. Another group of students who actually were working with us directly here in the Bay Area, they came to me because their parents, know us through a family connection. And anyway, the 2 kids were very excited about learning the bioprinter technology, and they said, we want to do something for our science project. So we got together with them and we started talking about biofilms and bacteria. So there is an increase, emergence of these superbugs that is, because of antimicrobial resistance and whatnot. So we talked about how biofilms is actually increasing the resistance of the bacterial cells, and the students wanted to do a project of using bioprinting technology to print these biofilms that will allow us to do screening tests of different antibiotics. So that was also a very exciting project, and the two kids who worked on this project, they actually won first prize for the science fair. So we were very, very proud of them for doing that. So yeah.
Well, one of the other questions is, do we worry about someone coming along and disrupting our space? And certainly for me, that's a concern on a daily basis. We have a patent around the collaborative curation of digital media. And, you know, when you have an idea, you don't always just run to the patent office, right? So that's very expensive. And especially in a global product like ours, applying for a global patent and going from provisional to permanent is extremely expensive. So there was a time frame in which you talk about what your idea is and whether or not it exists. And then in terms of disrupting, can someone else recreate it in a platform that they already have? So, you know, questions I get is, what if Facebook starts all of a sudden curating digital media? Or what if this company tries to do it? I found that that's a fear that can carry you and basically stunt you from being able to move forward. And having worked in a large company like GE, everyone we talked to was afraid that we were going to go and recreate their idea. And the fact of the matter is, you become so big, it's very hard to innovate, and you start acquiring and you start looking for disruptive technologies that you can pull into your matrix. So I more see that. I do I obviously pay attention to competitive products that are out there. I have yet to see anybody combining media from multiple places, and I do feel like we have some protection around that. How about you, Maya? How do you feel about somebody coming along and being able to recreate what you're doing?
I think that actually, I think it's a good thing if somebody wants to, be in the same space as us. And if there's competition, then it shows that there is a market demand and there's interest. So I think if somebody else is coming in to either, change or replace our technology, or even try to copy our technology or whatever, I think that's probably a good sign that, there's interest and there's a growing demand in the market. So to me, that those are good things. So we just have to be better in terms of defending what we have and making us more unique, and just, honing onto the value proposition that we bring to the customers. Yeah.
So another question is talking about validating ideas. How did we validate it? Through the market, which is one of the things that you've just answered, through our vision or through your friends. And for me, you already know that the first time I didn't validate it, I talked to my friends, and my friends said, that's a great idea. And my friends wrote me checks, and we ended up with a bunch of money, and people who wrote me $100,000 checks never used the product. So talking to your friends is not validation. Let's just be clear. So what I did was I started at the beginning and I read Lean Startup. It's so cliche, right? But I really had to take myself back to the place of a beginner in being a founder. And I thought, okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on this idea. I actually bought an animation for $5 on Fiverr, and I asked my friends to wish happy birthday to a fake person, and I stitched it together, and I started asking my friends to introduce me to people I didn't know, and I showed it to them. And within 2 weeks, I had 75 requests of people saying, hey, I've got a graduation coming up. Could you do this for my son? And, oh, it's my parents' 50th. Could you do this for them? And I answered yes to all of them, right? We're just gathering data. And I was managing over 800 video files in the course of 2 weeks. And the manual process that I was using was not scalable. And that's when I thought, okay, here's where we need a technology to solve the scalability and the ease of what I'm trying to do, which is why we built the mobile app. I didn't do it backwards, where I built a mobile app and then tried to find people to go and use it. Do you have anything else you want to add to how you validated your product, Maya?
Yeah, so I think, quote unquote validation was, obviously the innovation part of it from the NSF, but that's not really market validation, right? So I think I will caution people who go out there and get NSF grants. Great, NSF says your technology is awesome and it's innovative, but it's definitely not market validation. So when we first got the phase 1 grant, we actually went out there to start talking to teachers, people that we are our potential customers, right? There were a few schools who are very forward-thinking without even looking at the product, just understanding the concept or the idea that we're bringing to them. They are on board and they said, put me down for 3 printers when you have it. So that's great. But I think at this point, we're also at the stage where we're trying to grow and scale. And that's a whole different issue yet again, because you're going to always see those early adopters, these really forward-thinking and innovative schools. But as you go through, for us, in our case, as you go through working with more and more schools, and you start seeing the problems they face, the hurdles that you have to go through, and then, of course, the question of scaling and growth as well. So I think those are, at different stages of the company and life cycle, there are different challenges that you'll need to overcome as a startup. So, yeah.
Well, so one of the other things we can talk about is funding. So if this is interesting, you guys can ask us some questions about it. And I know before the session, even Maya and I were talking about how to raise and in what stage of raising, and that is an entirely new ballgame altogether yet again. So that's what I thought I would learn in the Entrepreneurial Fellowship Program, and turns out there was a lot more to learn than just funding. But if you have great connections, sometimes you can find yourself in front of people and opportunities that you are not ready for. My very first conversation about funding for my company was with Google Ventures. Okay, I wasn't prepared for that conversation. They were polite enough to take it because a friend of mine had received a sizable investment from Google, and they were in a partnership together. So pulled a little bit of strings to get me in front of somebody that I wasn't ready to talk to. And in fact, 2 years later, I could probably tell you that in 6 months, I'd be prepared to talk to them and wouldn't want to take that call right now. I think there is a lot of money, especially in Kansas City, available for startup ideas. $25,000, what they call digital sandbox grants, $50,000 Launch Kansas City grants. There was a contest that I was in called the Launch Kansas City competition, and they gave $500,000 in prize money to 10 companies, 50,000 tranche at a time. That I don't think is the biggest problem. The biggest problem is getting past that initial ideation, getting a product that is now ready, which takes longer than you think, and then being able to fund yourself through moving forward once you start talking to angel investors and when you get ready for, A round money and you're looking at venture capital, investors, which is where we are now, and Maya's in the seed round. It's challenging, but I really think that if you connect with the right network, if you're ready to take that leap, I found it inordinately easy to do to get off the ground. How about you, Maya? It sounds like you applied for some, innovation grant and got it.
Yeah, so we were quite fortunate. So the NSF innovation grant, there's two parts to it. Part one is like 150,000, and then part two is about 750,000, which was substantial. So we also got phase 2, which really helped a lot. But I think I'm also at the stage where, we're trying to raise more funding for growth and not so much for just a startup idea, because we're beyond the POC. So raising funding for growth it's a little bit trickier, as Laura has described, and it's definitely different from just getting the idea going. So I think that's where we're at now. We're trying to talk to through our network, potential investors, angel groups and whatnot. I think we're very fortunate to be in the Bay Area because we're surrounded by a very good community of investors and angel groups. So I think that's something that we're really fortunate about. But I think we'll see. We're just starting to talk to people, and fingers crossed we'll find some people who are really interested in biotech and education. So we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
I love this question. So it says, how do we explain disruptive technology and get others to be passionate about it? I spend A lot of time, and especially in the first year, when I did not consider myself technical at all, right? That wasn't my background. And in fact, I just was meandering into conversations where I didn't understand a single bit of verbiage that was out there. I put myself in positions where I was going to code schools and where I was going to different meetings with technology groups. And, I went out to, this is how I met the IEEE group, is that I wanted to be involved in the technology group a little bit more. I went out to the Women in Engineering conference and I participated in their pitch competition. But we spend a lot of time working with a program in Kansas City called CAPS, which is a Center for Advanced Professional Studies with Kids. And then we have different strands for digital and technology strands. And when you are trying to bring kids up in through science and technology in STEM, you've got to expose them to what different jobs exist in tech. So I think that I thought tech was a coder and that was it. And, we've had now 4 interns that have been in through the high school program in our building who have worked here. And we've just got some information today. We've got a couple kids from Harvard who want to come out and work with us. So how you get them excited about it is you immerse them in it and you expose them to all the different jobs and all the different opportunities there are inside of technology, which is a huge umbrella, broader than I think the base thinks. How about you? I mean, you're working with students every day, so.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, partly why we as a company decided to be in the education space and start at high school and maybe potentially even middle school someday soon is because, when we see the kids get excited about it, they learn about the technology, and they do something really cool. That's where the passion, really shines, not just through the students, but also the parents. They feel so proud of their kids doing all these things, right? Winning science fairs and whatnot. And I think that's how we will be able to sort of spread the technology itself in terms of what it's doing or what it can potentially do in the future, and getting people really motivated and excited about learning about a new technology, in my case, such as bioprinting. So I think that's how we're really kind of spreading the idea through what the kids are able to do in the space. So that's
when we say disruptive technology, to me, I mean, it's a little buzzword bingo because it means different things to different people. Absolutely. When you are disrupting, I think it's really you're offering a new way to do something. You're moving a needle and you're moving a market forward. And right now there's so much happening in tech that everything seems like it's been thrown up in the air and it's falling down and people are finding, their new silos. How do I feel about Kickstarter investment model? I have in that fellowship program that I told you about, there were 10 other people in there with me. And one of them had a successful Kickstarter campaign and raised quite enough, a bit of money, and was able to develop their mobile app based on a successful Kickstarter campaign. It's not a route that I went through. Probably because I was afraid of it, really. I mean, I think it was a lot of creating a video and making marketing material that would get people to understand what you were doing. It might have been a logical process for us, but I didn't really understand or hadn't seen it be successful until my friend had already done it. And by that time, I'd already raised the funds that I needed. I think it's a great idea if you have a product that is consumer ready and people are going to get behind it. And if you're really good at telling your story, I think it's a way that you can get off the ground. I don't know what connections you get out of it, though. For me, it was really about having access to mentors and the connections and inserting myself in the startup community here and being able to move across the different groups here in the community. And I don't think you get that in a Kickstarter campaign, but if all you need is money, might not be a bad idea. What do you think, Maya? Have you ever thought about a Kickstarter for a bioprinter?
Absolutely. And I totally agree with Laura on, I think beyond just the money, I think as a company or a startup, you need to think about what the Kickstarter is going to bring, or the Kickstarter campaign is going to bring for the company. So we thought about Kickstarter a year ago, and, our product, a bioprinter, is not going to be Kickstarter suitable, right? Because, we don't see consumers buying bioprinters tomorrow. That's just not going to happen. So we realized that, okay, we're not going to do the Kickstarter. But recently, we actually thought about doing sort of an Indiegogo campaign, because we have a lot of schools who want to have printers or want to get our printers, but they have no funding. So one idea that came to us, and we're starting in the works of doing this, is to maybe do a Indiegogo campaign for the schools, and to help them to raise funds, right? So we're helping the schools raise funds so that they could get the funding to buy a couple of printers, and they could use this in the lab for their classroom and whatnot. So that's something that we're working on right now. If anybody out there has any ideas about this and want to help us out, feel free to drop me a note.
It's all about that video, right? I mean, I don't know if I have been on the Kickstarter website, and, that is a time suck. You can get sucked into watching those, the videos, super creative people for sure.
Absolutely.
I would love to see what you would do with bioprinting, Maya. I really would.
I'll keep you posted.
Okay, there's another question. What is the biggest disruptive tech that you've seen in the past 10 years, your personal opinion? I have opinion about that. I think it's the Uber model, right? So I think that what Uber has done to on-demand employment, so beyond just whether or not it's for a taxi service or now delivering food and, any other job that you might need. I think that was truly disruptive, which is why you saw so much backlash from the taxi industries and, places like Austin where Uber is not even allowed. The other thing I might think of is, I'm drawing a blank, but where you can stay in someone else's house. What's that, Maya? Airbnb. I got help over in the corner. I always have to have help. But Airbnb, I think that was truly disruptive. And people say, well, is that technology? It absolutely is technology, because this little device that you hold in the palm of your hand then gives you access to an entire fleet of employees, an entire option of choices. So that would be my opinion in terms of global disruptive technology. What about maybe more in the medical space or where you're at, Maya? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, I think that, there's definitely, 3D printing as a whole, I think, is going to be, is disrupting the technology in the sense of personalized medicine, right? So I think that, to me, is going to be next big thing that is we're already starting to see that. People, a couple of companies who are already using 3D printing to create specific dental implants and molds and whatnot. So to me, I think that is going to be really exciting, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities that will open up along the lines with bioprinting technology as well. But there's still a lot of hurdles that we have to go through because of the FDA issues and whatnot. So it's going to be a long process, but the community is very positive about where the direction is going. So we're very much involved in changing that. But I do agree with Laura on Uber, because personally, I think every one of us is affected by how Uber is changing our lives, and I think, to me, that was also one of the most disruptive things.
They're fascinating, right? I mean, I just love talking to some of them, and I've had a couple opportunities in how far ahead they're planning with that technology. Mm-hmm. Here's a great question. It says, but I work in a big company. Do you have advice on how to bring a disruptive idea to leadership? Yes, I do. And I did also work in a big company, and, thank goodness I had the experience that I did at GE and the leadership that I did, because I was disrupting stuff on a daily basis. I mean, one look at me and you can tell I'm running around, just trying to figure out a different way to do something. You've got to treat it like you would an investor. So if you have an idea, you've got to validate it first. We already talked about that. Once you present it to leadership at your company, you have to have some level of validation and explanation. And then, you really have to be clear on what it's going to mean to their business and how it's going to work in their business. And then here's the other thing. If they aren't prepared to do it, but it's going to be successful through your validation engine, get out there and do it. go do it, and they'll come back to you later. Keep those ties. Sometimes you just can't innovate like that inside a big company because the roadmap is 5 years ahead and you can't insert that in. We're not nimble enough. But I think when you present those ideas, you have to do it in the same way I would do to an investor who I want to get on board as a believer with my idea and invest, because that's what you're basically asking your company to do. That's my advice. How about you, Maya?
For me, I don't think I have that level of, I guess not that much experience as you, Laura. I come from a very academic world. So, and unfortunately, when I was working in Singapore, it's quite top-down management. So even if we had, ideas, I was surprised how top-down management it was in Singapore. And that's partly why I left. I just wasn't happy about the way things were.
And that's the other thing I said you could do, right? You can also leave. You stumble on that idea and it's going to disrupt, but it's going to be a positive disruption. There's nothing that should stop you from trying it. I think that we're at 40 minutes now. I've had a great conversation. I'm going to see if there's one more question here. Oh, I think we should answer this one. It says, as you talk a little bit about alternative funding models, can both of you talk about smart money specifically during your growth? Yes. Smart money, I think, is, for me now, if someone came and wrote me a check for $1 million and they weren't invested in my business and they didn't have channel partners that could help me and they didn't have consumer mobile app experience, that wouldn't help me. I'd be taking money. I would consider that, some people do it because that's how they have to survive. But at this stage, when I am out looking for investors right now, they are specific. I'm looking for people who either have a community where we can deploy our model and that works. I am looking for people who have experience with technology like ours in a mobile app to consumer space, or in the user interface with our individual customers, which are a certain age and a certain gender. So for me, it's really about finding that next level investor who can bring something more than just money. And that's a lot harder. I will tell you that's a lot harder, especially in the Midwest. I don't think we're essentially known for consumer mobile apps. We have a lot of tech here, a lot of ag tech, a lot of SaaS models, but not a lot of successful consumer apps are created in the Midwest. So I'm starting to look in other areas of the country for where I could find investors that could bring something more than money. And I know that's going to be important for Maya. Why don't you talk about what you're specifically?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree that with Laura, for us, it's not just about money. And we know that, it's very important to find strategic partnerships, connections, and people who could take the company and the business to the next level. So for us, definitely, whether it's an angel investor or even potentially a VC type company who's interested in investing, we wanted to make sure that, they understand the business and they can help us to take us into the next level. So for me personally, because I'm very connected with the Asian community, I've been invited to, I am Chinese, but I'm not from China. But I have been invited to send proposals into China because the Chinese government is investing a lot in technology and they want to bring, business from outside the country into China, right? So we have gotten a few requests to submit proposals to China. So even for that, for me, it's a foreign country for me because I've never grew up or lived in China. So even on that perspective, we need to be really cautious about who are we partnering in China, what kind of opportunities are they lending us to in China and whatnot. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about as we look at opportunities outside of the United States. So yeah, so I definitely have to be careful about making these decisions.
So let's do this. Let's give everybody 15 minutes of their life back and just say thank you to everyone. I know I thank you. Maya thanks you. I hope that there's been something interesting. I'm certainly willing to share more. If there's anything that we can do to help you, let us know. You can keep the conversation going on social media. So it's hashtag WIE Wednesday, WIE and then Wednesday, or on Twitter at WIE ILC. You can send us questions there, and I'll go on Twitter for just a little bit before my next call, and I'll answer them directly if I can. You can also find me at Laura@VideoFizz or at VideoFizz.com. And Maya, why don't you let them know how they could get a hold of you if they had additional questions for you? Absolutely.
So you can find me under Mayasari L, so Mayasaril. You could tweet me there, or you could also tweet us at my company, SE3D-EDU. So either way, we'll be happy to address any questions you might have, and any suggestions that you might have. We're also very open to chat with you guys on Twitter. Thank you so much for joining.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.